there's a lot of talking. There's the breakfast, and then there's a session, and a long break. And then afterwards, some people stay and have lunch. So a lot of networking. And it's also fun visiting people's offices and hearing about their processes. Also the fact that not all TMFers are TMF managers. Some are CTAs, some are process managers, some are system owners. So there's a lot of ways of being a TMFer, and that's a big takeaway from being in the TMF networking group, because it's not just being a CTA or being a TMF manager. There's a lot of things you can actually do when you work in the TMF.
Welcome back to another episode of TMF Daily. I'm your host, Nicole Palmer, and today we have a phenomenal guest joining us from Denmark, a key member of the TMF Network, Carla Navarra Anderson. And we're diving deep into the world of transformation and leadership. We're uncovering the strategies and insights that can elevate our lives and businesses. Our guest is not only an expert in their field, but also embodies the spirit of growth and resilience. So get ready to be inspired, take some notes, because this conversation is going to change the way you think and about your potential. Carla, welcome to the TMF Daily Podcast.
Oh, thank you, Nicole, and thank you for the very nice introduction.
I am so excited to have you back and to talk about the TMF Network, which I had never heard about until we first chatted. And so I thought it would be awesome to just talk about it today, and maybe you can give us a little bit of history behind it.
Sure. I think it's pretty special. I haven't heard any other countries having a TMF network like ours. Well, yeah, but in short, the Danish TMF network is a group of, a couple of representatives from the different Danish pharmaceutical companies who meet and discuss TMF issues and current trends. So we meet around twice a year, and we take turns hosting at each other's offices. The point of this is, to share knowledge about the eTMF and, learnings from recent inspections and just in general, also networking. It's not because there are only few eTMFers, but we're not that many at each company. So it's nice to, meet other TMFers. So yeah, we meet twice a year, and if there are questions or issues members would like to discuss between these meetings, we have a mailing list. And recently, we also created a group on LinkedIn where we can post things that we'd like to share between us.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Yeah. So, and you asked about the origin story, I guess. I wasn't one of the founding members. I just, I joined a couple of years ago. So I had to meet with one of the founding members. And she told me about the story of how they created the...
Who is the founder?
It's a woman called Signe, and I have another name as well. And I don't think he works in TMF as well, but she was the one who told me the story, right? So she works at one of the big companies, pharmaceutical companies in Denmark. And of all the places that the founders could meet, they actually met in London at a TMF summit. Between sessions, I guess, during a break, they were talking about that they were going to be implementing this new, very exciting thing called an eTMF. And they were, unsure of how they're supposed to do this because not many pharmaceutical companies at that time had an eTMF at all. So she met another, I think they were CTAs or process managers from another big Danish pharmaceutical company. And they were talking and they were, thinking, oh, why shouldn't we just meet up and, talk about the progress of our implementation and challenges we're having? And we're like, yeah, that's a good idea. And then there were two other Danish companies also at the summit, but they're like, from the much larger, one of the largest Danish companies, even larger than the two others. So now we have 4 companies talking about exchanging knowledge. And the 2 other companies were much further along with their process of implementing the eTMF. So they've been through it and they wanted to share the knowledge with the 2 other companies. So yeah, so in the beginning, it was very, very system heavy. And there were only 8 people in the group. But then, started getting bigger and bigger because then they were going from just system implementation to how do we actually use the system? How is this affecting our other processes and the people working in the system? So they were just, gathering more and more people. And then it became very TMF focused because now we have all implemented eTMFs. So now we're just talking about how do we work with the eTMF in this new space. Yeah, it's a very long story. But then the pandemic came. And
Right.
and also the girl, she started working for an eTMF system provider. So she didn't think it was appropriate for her to be in the group because, she would have, interests that are maybe not, She stepped out of the group, and also the pandemic came and they tried having the meetings online and it just didn't work. So after the pandemic, it kind of died down. And then in 2021, it started up again. So, yeah. So now I sent you a picture of the latest meeting, and we were like maybe 28, 30 people in that photo. And a lot of people actually did not come to that meeting. So it's a large group.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's one of the things I love about conferences. That's where the magic happens, when you just start networking and you just never know where it's going to take you.
Yeah, definitely. You're just standing there awkwardly just trying to make conversation, and suddenly you're leading a group of TMFers from 15 different pharmaceutical companies.
So what initially drew you to the TMF network, and what's your experience been since joining?
Yeah, so even though I was working with the TMF for many years as a CTA, I actually didn't know the group existed. And it was only after I started my current job, I was told to join because one of the managers in my current company had worked together with one of the original founders. Not Sina, but one of the other founders. And she encouraged me to write to them and ask when the next meeting was going to be. And, he actually wrote back and said, we haven't had a meeting since the pandemic, and this is in 2021, around September 2021. I was like, maybe we should start it up again. So, yeah, so they called in for the first, post-pandemic meeting. And and my experience with this is, it sounds dramatic, but I thought, wow, I found my people. Yeah, because these are people they just work with TMF, and they have a lot of concerns and questions about the TMF, and they care about the TMF. So it's been nothing but positive. And, when I started as an eTMF manager, and I mentioned this, in the last episode, it was, the eTMF manager role was a bit elusive. No one really knew what it was. It was kind of new, and I wasn't sure, how to completely go about it. So it was really nice meeting with other people who were TMF managers or, process managers, because made me realize that it can be done in different ways. Mm-hmm. And also you can also shape it in the way that you want to. And so all of us are very different in how we do things. And that can also inspire you to, think differently about how you go about things. So, and I look forward to, each meeting. And even now that I'm no longer an eTMF manager, I still go to the meetings in my own time, of course, but I just do because I get so much out of it.
Mm-hmm. I love having that safe space where you can just ask questions, not be judged.
Yes.
And then just getting different perspectives from different people in the industry.
Yeah, definitely. Also because, again, some people are much further along in having an eTMF. Some are maybe changing over to a new system that others have experience with. So instead of, constantly trying to figure out things for yourself, why not, just ask and get, firsthand knowledge and experience.
So is clinical research pretty big in Denmark?
It's huge, I found out, because I thought it was normal to have that many pharmaceutical companies and clinical research companies in one country. We are, I think, just about 5.5 million people in total in the whole entire company. And I tried looking up how many pharmaceutical companies there were, and I think I stopped counting when I counted to 28. That's a lot per capita. Yeah. So it's pretty big. Yeah, a big export of ours.
So how do the meetups and the exchanges at the TMF network, how does that enhance the quality of inspections across the members' companies?
I guess you could say I don't have any, metrics about how many findings there were before or after joining the group, and all of it is pretty anecdotal. And it's also very hard to compare because, we have different products and we have different health authorities inspecting us. But it's been really nice hearing about the things that are trending within inspections.
That's always fun.
Yeah, because also many of us go many years without being inspected. And then suddenly, you submit a new drug and then all the health authorities come flooding in, right? So a lot of things can happen between the last time you've been inspected. So it's nice, get a refresher or maybe, an update on what's going on. So, yeah. So for example, when I was last inspected, I still work with the paper TMF, and we were inspected by the FDA, and they look for other things than other health authorities. And it's just, oh, wow, they didn't ask that. And, they just asked for, they just gave us a list of the documents that we needed to provide. And then essentially, not that I did this, but you could essentially just write the documents while you were there and just provide it to them. They would never know.
Right.
Yeah. So it's completely different now. And that's really good because you feel prepared for your inspection in a completely different way than you did before. Because even though they're not looking for the same things always, or it's different from health authority to health authority, you get a gist of what they might be looking for. So you feel more prepared.
So can you explain the significance of the roundtables, particularly the CTIS, CTR discussions, during your gatherings?
Yeah, and it's the same, with the talk about inspections. When we do the roundtables, we have, different the perspectives because we're in different phases of implementing the new processes, like an EU CTR process. But it's nice to see what the pain points are and what are especially trending and what people have challenges with. One of the major things we realized during these roundtables were that surprisingly a lot of things that affected our TMF processes when the EU CTR and the CTIS were implemented. And the CTIS is, if people don't know, it's the submissions portal or the portal where you communicate with the health authorities within the EU. So they have some very specific requirements for the submissions documents, for example, that very much affect the way we work with the documents. And you don't realize that if you're just working with yourself, with your documents and not really speaking to other people, because you just think, oh, okay, it's just, maybe it's an isolated experience that I'm having. But when you hear everyone having the same experience, you maybe go think, okay, it's not just me.
So, it's a good feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so nice that, not that I like other people having, issues with things, but it's just so nice. I haven't misunderstood anything. It is challenging. It is difficult. So it's nice to know that you're not alone. And some people are really smart and they, figure out things that they are really, really nice to share with us. Other people. And so we don't have to, look for answers, having to invent things from the bottom. Someone's been through it.
Right.
Yeah, they want to share.
So what are some other common challenges you hear about during these meetings, regarding the inspections?
Well, some of the common challenges that we've talked about a lot was that sometimes inspectors aren't really trained in eTMF systems. Of course, they require to get some training if they access the eTMF systems themselves. If they want to, look in the eTMF system themselves, of course, they need some sort of training from the sponsor. And we do give that, but still that sometimes isn't enough because, of course, we do have, some specific requirements to an eTMF, but there aren't always specific requirements to the process for the different sponsors, and we all do it differently. So sometimes, you can get a finding or a comment about something that we have in our process that we've written into the process, but they may not think is very productive or efficient in some way. So it's sometimes becoming, not a personal issue, but it's becoming, how would they like us to work with the system? And and I don't think, it is.
That's kind of a personal opinion if they don't think it's efficient.
I know. And this is not from an inspection, but this is from a mock inspection that we had it because in the system that we use, you can enter into the eTMF in different ways. You can, we have a library where you can filter for things, and we have a TMF view where you can look at the documents in a way that, us boomers used to look at, like in sections and open up like a binder. So, and I think maybe he went into a view that he didn't think was a very efficient way of working, or he had trouble finding the documents, or maybe finding, the logic in how that view was set up. I think that could have been, remedied by him just asking, what do you usually do? I mean, how's your process? Instead of just asking, oh, please give me access to your eTMF, and I should be able to look at the eTMF in a very instinctive, intuitive way. And, that's not our fault that the eTMF system is set up in a certain way. And yeah, maybe we use the eTMF in a different way than he maybe is expecting us to do. Yeah, I think that's one of the things which I think is very odd, because, and I've heard that from people, that the way that the eTMF is set up has been commented on. And I know that we have a lot of say, as a sponsor, of how we build up our eTMF, and there's a lot of customizable things that we can do, but that's how it works for us. And
right.
Yeah. And how
there's nothing in the guidelines that says that, though.
Exactly. And just
so
because
they can't ding you for that.
They did. Well, it's a mock inspection, so it's okay. But we were like, oh wow, okay, you could just have asked us. But his personal opinion, I thought maybe it was his personal opinion was that the eTMF should be intuitive and should be easy to use. I mean, I wish that was the case as well, but it's different from people to people, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what you're used to. Yeah. So that's one thing. And because we've gone electronic, there are different things they're looking at that have surprised a lot of us in the beginning. So like system management, which maybe, is the old, archive log, the one people sign in and out of. Now it's electronic. You can't really, tamper with that. And documents stored outside of the eTMF system. Sometimes there are things that need to be outside of the eTMF system, and they ask for that, and we can't, give them access to all the systems. So there's, a bit of, discussion on what do we give them access to. Mm-hmm. And do we need to look them over the shoulder? Do they need guided access? So, and it's different from inspector to inspector. And again, with audit trail review, things that we're not used to, deleted documents, suddenly, in the olden days, you could just, rip many pages out of an eTMF and then throw it out, and no one would ever know. Now, everyone would know because they can just look in the audit trails. And, and the fact that you have to prove that you have sponsor oversight, sometimes they want that in the system. Sometimes they don't want a log. They want to see in the system that things have been done. And again, as you say, there's no specific way this has to be documented. Maybe not, not that I've seen, but so we do it in different ways. And it's just, sometimes it's not enough. And how detailed you want that sponsor oversight to be. And also the very classic, and the thing they always check, because it's an easy finding, is that they look at how many documents was added to the eTMF the day after the inspection notice. Yeah. And we're like, okay, dude, we know we're going to get that finding. Just add it onto the list. You don't have to, because I think it's an unfair finding. Because, first of all, it's easy. And yeah, that people are going to be more aware of the eTMF after an inspection notice, because that's the first place they go, right? Right. And when you were working on paper, no one would ever know if a document went into the binder timely or 10 years later than you're supposed to do. And again, I'm not saying that's okay, but we have to look into, what is the value of you pointing that out to us? Because, look at what kind of documents went in. Of course, it's not okay that the protocol went in or the IB went in the day after an inspection notice, but maybe just, look at what kind of documents went in. Because it may not be
the criticality.
Yeah, exactly. So those are, there's a lot of challenges. And again, it's coming from the fact that we've gone from paper to electronic, and inspectors need to, find their footing as well in what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about how do you prepare to host a session with the TMF network, and what do you hope to achieve during your turn?
The way we decide on who to host is actually we agree on it at the session we're at. We always have it as the last point of agenda, and we ask who wants to host. And people are really willing to host, and people like hosting these. And we try to hit different companies, so we all get turns. And we always want to pick the companies who have the best snacks and the best parking.
Parking, yes, parking's huge.
Parking is huge. I mean, it's free parking.
Yes,
parking is very expensive in Copenhagen. But yeah, and it's weird with the snacks, right? Because we always want a certain company to host because they have proper chefs working in their cafeteria. So they're like, please, we can't host again. So yeah, and how do we prepare? Yeah, when I hosted one, I actually hosted the second one after the pandemic. So we prepare like you would do at any big meeting, send out an invite, ask for agenda topics, coordinate with speakers, order the snacks, and it's fun, and people, they are actually a lot of people volunteer to host a session or provide agenda topics. And what do you get out of it? I think when you're the host, you own the agenda, so you can steer the discussion in a certain way. So if you're having particular issues with something, then you can add that to the agenda. And the last people who hosted, they actually, they did all the sessions themselves. Well, they asked for one other company to chime in, but otherwise they wanted to share their experiences. So if you have something you really want to share, then host one, and then you can actually decide on the discussion. So, and networking. I mean, after the first meeting, we had to admit that a lot of us are talkers. So now the agenda is actually, we put in as much time for breaks and networking as actual sessions. And we do 3-hour meetings.
Is it 3 hours?
3 hours. So we start off with breakfast, like pastries. Danish are big on pastries, so we get pastries and coffees. And I know several people meet up before the meeting starts.
The meeting before the meeting.
I know. People are like, should we meet up and let's have coffee? And can we, let's drive together, let's carpool. And, so it's because, there's a lot of talking. There's the breakfast, and then there's a session, then a long break. And then afterwards, some people, stay and have lunch. So, yeah. So it's so a lot of networking. And it's also fun visiting people's offices and hearing about their processes. And, also the fact that not all TMFers are TMF managers. Some are CTAs, some are process managers, some are, system owners. So there's a lot of ways of being a TMFer. And I think that's a big takeaway from being in the TMF networking group. Because it's not just, being a CTA or being a TMF manager. So there's a lot of things you can actually do when you work in the TMF. So, yeah. And sometimes, people get inspiration for new jobs. Changing jobs is not a bad thing. And again, there's no competition at all. So we're just, I guess, it's funny because, some of the people I meet were the ones that trained me in my previous companies, and there's no hard feelings. It's just, and some of the people that I meet are, that are in the group are people that I trained when I was in my previous company, and now they're, growing and doing, awesome stuff themselves. So it's really nice to meet up and see how they grow. And yeah.
That's so important too, to never burn bridges, because you never know where you're going to see these people again or how they're going to potentially help you in the future. It always comes full circle.
I agree. And it's also a thing in the Danish pharmaceutical companies because, there are, the same people study together because we have, not that many universities. And then many of them study together. Many of them started out the same place. And people know each other.
Right.
Yeah. So it's very important to, as you say, not burn bridges. That's very important.
Can you share a memorable insight or like a lesson from a past TMF meeting that's influenced your work?
Oh, 100% the discussions we had about the EU-CTR and the CTIS. I mean, the funny thing is that randomly I was tasked to write the work instruction and implement the whole submissions process under the EU-CTR for my company. Again, that's what happens when you work for a small company, right? It's like, oh, who can do this? Oh, you look like you're bored. Please do this. I was like, okay, yeah, I can do that. So I was just thinking maybe, while I was writing the work instruction and working with the first submission in the CTIS, I was thinking, wow, this is a different way of working with documents. And maybe, I was just overthinking because I'm an eTMF manager, right? So you do that, you see TMF everywhere. I was thinking, okay, maybe this is a discussion for the TMF network, right? So I actually had a session where I was, talking about, oh guys, there are new documents that are required in the new ECTR and the CTF. And they're like, yeah, we know. And we've been having trouble with, working with these documents, finding out where to file them in the eTMF and, with the TMF reference model. And I was thinking, oh, this is a very, very good, discussion point, and people are really passionate about it. And it grew to me actually, creating a presentation that I've presented at other TMF conferences. And I didn't even know that people were interested in this, because when I, thought about it when I was just, doing the process implementation, I didn't think maybe I just thought it was a me problem. It was actually, a very common problem that everyone struggles with, and people really want to hear about it. And yeah, now they're joking that I'm going on my world tour with with this presentation. But it's so important because people sometimes, like when authorities implement something that we're supposed to just abide by, which is fine, sometimes they don't know how much it trickles down to the people who are actually working with it and how much trouble it actually causes, like the people who are doing the hands-on work, that they, maybe just offhandedly. I know that the regulation is not offhandedly written, but I don't think they realized how much impact it had on the eTMF. Because the EUCTR, it's like, oh, they want simplicity, less admin work, but it proved to be a lot of admin work.
It's a lot of admin work.
Yeah, getting the documents to be the format that it needs to be to get into the CTIS, the way that they're named, the way they're, new documents, suddenly it's a lot more admin work for us. But yeah, maybe it was the point not having, maybe the point was to simplify, but it was actually the complete opposite. So that discussion, having that discussion at the TMF meeting, all the topics and all the pain points that, that they were talking about, I added that into my presentation. And suddenly, I had a 45-minute presentation that people were actually interested in hearing, not just TMFers.
So I'm kind of curious, how do you handle disagreements or differing perspectives that arise during these discussions? So
I don't know if TMFers are just, an especially agreeable bunch. But there are not many disagreements. I guess first of all, I think because we do have different processes. So just, that, I can't tell you your process is wrong if that's the process you have in your company, right? So, okay, we can agree to disagree. That's how you do things. That's how I do things. And then for some of the things that maybe, are more general, we do have, regulations. We have guidance from the health authorities. And we also have, CDISC who standardize a lot of things. So, that's always, the card you throw on the table. The TMF reference model says. And then you can close that discussion pretty quickly. So, yeah. But I think people, they agree to disagree and also maybe try to learn from each other. Because, it's never been a competition. Having a great TMF. The TMF is not the product we're selling to anyone.
Right.
So my TMF, even though it's better than yours or yours is better than mine, it doesn't matter because we're not selling this. So we're just interested in that all our TMFs are really good TMFs. And, because it's not a competition. It's just, just inspiring each other and, helping each other out. So there's not a lot of disagreements as such. We're just very into standards.
I love that. And I think you're absolutely right, especially with like us TMFers, we're not really like argumentative. We're there to like learn and inspire, like, well, this is how I do it. How do you do it? Maybe there's a better way. Like, let's brainstorm together.
Yeah, exactly. Because a lot of us are process people. We're interested in getting it as good as we can. And if you're doing it even better, let me just copy that. Or can you?
Right.
Yeah. An example is that one of the TMF Network members do is because we use EDL in a certain way, and then they do. And she was like, "Oh, I really need to hear more about how you do this. Can I call you in for a meeting?" Yeah, because some of her colleagues were like, "Oh, we think EDLs are really bad. We shouldn't use that." And then we were talking about what are the pros and cons of an EDL? Why have we chosen to do it in this way? And why should you just keep the EDL the way you're doing it? And it's, because of course we can do it different ways and none of the ways are wrong. They're just different.
Right.
Yeah. So it's very, very inspiring to hear about how other people are doing it.
So with the TMF network, like how do they make sure like all the voices are heard during the meetings?
That's a challenge. First of all, we do have the roundtables.
Right.
Yeah, those are really good because then everyone, all those who want to say something, they can say, something, right? And the fact that we change hosts are also a way that get, people heard during the meetings, because then, sometimes when we host it, we're like, oh, we really want to hear from that company. They never say anything during the meetings, but we know that they're doing something right? So we ask them, oh, could you share maybe this process of how you review audit trails or, whatever. So we try to get everyone involved, but essentially, everyone gets heard. Everyone makes sure that they get heard. And also we have 3-hour meetings. We try to make time for everyone to be heard as well. And also different people come to the different sessions because some of the companies have a lot of representatives. So we have, huge pharma companies that are also in the networking group. They can send, I think one of them have 10 members. So they only send maybe 2 or 3 at a time. So it's different people who come to the different sessions. So we also get different voices, even from the same companies.
How do you see like the role of technology evolving in the inspection process based on these discussions at the TMF network?
Yeah. And it's, as again, with what I mentioned before, that it's very different now that we have, eTMF systems. It's completely different, the inspection process. Well, first of all, the technology, tattles on us all the time. So it's, it's a very different, it's a difficult way to work sometimes because sometimes things happen and you need to put things in later than you would have maybe, or you can maybe accidentally press the approve button faster than you were meant to. And things like that happen. And, the technology tells a different story than what the actual reality is, right? So it's, the technology is really driving the way that the inspections are done. It's odd, really, because, they're looking at different things now. They're not just looking at the documents themselves. They're looking at how we process the documents, how we work in the system. And, it's just, it's not just, the content anymore. It's also the form, the technology that they're looking at. Oh, yeah. Another thing with the new technology, everyone is, is expected now to own their own documents. So like all the departments, they own their own documents, right? That's also a new thing that the inspectors also look at. It's no longer, can you find the document? It's how, DM, come show me how you worked with this document. So everyone needs to know how to work with the technology. And everyone, there's an expectation from the inspectors that everyone is involved with managing the eTMF. So that's also new and also something very different than what we're used to. Because it was very difficult for us to get people, to be excited about the eTMF. And if you say, well, you do know that you're going to be asked by an inspector how you find your documents, right? Where your documents are stored, or which sections of the eTMF you have your documents in. Like, oh no, it's changed the way that people, yeah. So it's driving different things and also driving, people's ownership. Because, even though we're not running clinical trials to appease an inspector, a lot of people work with inspection in mind. And so it's a very good motivator when you tell them you're going to be asked about this during an inspection. So, and I know we shouldn't, threaten people, but it's a very efficient way of getting people to actually be interested in the eTMF. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good tactic to remind people or different departments, like, you will be asked about your documents and where they're being stored and how you're accessing them. Like, I can't file that for you. You are the document owner.
Yeah, but you can also, I can feel a difference from when we started to now. I asked, some statisticians about a document they had that were still in progress, right? And I just thought they forgot to put it in approval, but they actually had a very, sensible answer to why it was still. And I was like, wow, that's very different than what I'm used to. So, they're beginning to think about how they work with the document because they're also using the eTMF as their workspace and no longer a thing, where they dump their documents after the study has been conducted. So that was a very interesting insight, and, things are moving forward.
So what advice would you give to new members about making the most of their TMF experience with the TMF network?
This is, just in general as well. Don't be afraid to ask. So many of us want to give the image that we know everything. And also just because we're TMFers, we're supposed to know everything about the TMF, right? But now TMF actually is quite wide. It's a wide topic. And many things are learned by doing. And not all answers can be found written in guidelines or regulations. The available resources that we might have are not always specific enough to cover all scenarios that you might meet. So, by asking real humans or people who have been through it can sometimes be just much more helpful, and you can get, concrete examples and proper help with the challenge you're having instead of, spiraling in different ways or, spending too much time looking for answers that might not be there. So just ask. It's the best way of, using the TMF network.
And looking ahead, what are your aspirations for the TMF network and its impact on the community?
I hope a lot that by sharing the knowledge we have from inspections, and not just, from inspections, but, our daily work, the TMFers can feel more prepared and comfortable with being inspected. Because, of course, as I mentioned before, we can't always know what an inspector will focus on. But the more prepared you feel, or the more stories you hear about inspections, the less intimidating it is. And also by sharing, findings or, weird comments from inspectors, it's just very helpful. It's just very helpful to hear, okay, oh, wow, they said that to you as well. So it's not just us that did it wrong, or, they might be looking for that. So we need to be, prepared for that. And also, I think the big thing is sometimes when you get in an inspection finding, or maybe just a comment, some people get tunnel vision, and then they hurry up and change their processes. They, almost, redo their whole TMF because the inspector offhandedly said something that might not even be true, right? So, and I remember this from my previous company. We suddenly changed something that was not in the regulations at all. It was just something that the inspector said that would be a good idea to have, but then we just changed everything, and then we kept, finding deviations from a process that we just made up ourselves. So sometimes it's nice to, just air the idea. Do you guys know if this is an actual requirement from the regulators? Is this an actual issue that we need to, to take care of? Of course, sometimes we get kappas, but it's like, how much do we change from our processes? It's just training that we need, or do we need to change our whole system? Just, gauge. So I think that's really nice to have, someone to spar with. And then it's just, makes the inspection, a little less intimidating, and maybe more productive a productive tool for us to get better.
So where is the best way for people to join the TMF network?
Well, the best way is for the Danish, for us, it's word of mouth. I mean, people hear about it. Most people can join. We even have CROs actually in the TMF group. I think we're mostly, welcoming to all, but we do want it to stay face to face. So it's a requirement that you can actually meet up face to face. We actually have non-Danes in the TMF network group. They're from Norway. They've flown in from Norway to join the 3-hour meeting. So that's very, that's commitment. So, it's not impossible to join from. But I urge people to maybe try to create networks themselves. Why not? If it works, to do it online or, So, and I've met good friends as well, and it's mostly, you hear about it from other people who are in and also from summits, because the Norwegian girls, they joined from a TMF summit as well in London. Feel like, what is this? What is this community? Can we join? Yeah, probably that's the best way.
It's always word of mouth, isn't it? That's like the best.
It is. And also because, when people advertise things or, join us group, it's like, what do you want from us?
Right.
Yeah. It's like, are you trying to sell us anything? Because sometimes, and it's not say something about TMF providers. Of course, they need to make money as well. Sometimes they, say, come join this. But then it's actually, a sell for their eTMF system, or it's actually an advertisement, which I think sometimes is too bad, because here we're not selling anything.
Right.
It's just good old knowledge sharing.
Is there a cost to join?
No, it's free.
No, you just show up. It's free. 3 hours. You get breakfast and maybe lunch.
Yes, you get breakfast and a great lunch. Yeah, and actually I had to pay for my lunch last time, so that's not even free. So and that's it, because people do it. Now because I'm a CTM, I have to actually use my own private time to be in the ETM. So I do it out of interest. Sheer interest. So I don't get,
And value.
Yeah, of course. Because, it makes my job easier as well. If I know the ETMF, I don't have to rely on anyone else for my ETMF, right? And also being inspection ready as well. Because at some point I will be inspected, and it doesn't matter if you're a TMF or a CTM or a DM or a statistician, you need to know about the TMF. So it's good to be prepared. Yeah. No cost. We do try to limit the people who come into our LinkedIn group. Yeah. And we also limit it to no eTMF providers. And it's also just, because of conflict of interest.
Yeah. We don't want that.
No, it's a different conversation when.
Right.
Yeah.
No selling.
No, and not, and giving us, good ideas on how we should do our TMF.
Well, Carla, thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I just like talking about this group. I think it's a fun group. I don't feel at all that it's work when we meet.